Hello, everybody. Welcome to Before the Commit, episode 14. We're going to be covering dev containers and sandboxing for Claude Code. Very interesting topic. Kind of some under the hood, plumbing mechanics type stuff. In the Killam chain, we're going to talk about something called vibe hacking, a trend that's emerging or maybe just more well known now. And in News or Noise, we're going to cover something interesting regarding a very Dustin Hillgartner. Hey, Dustin, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. Been a few weeks since we brought you this, being sick, both of us, and travel and stuff. So it's been 3 weeks. But yeah, I mean, by doing this, I realized the importance of sure, we're, we're sort of subject matter experts in software engineering, and we're kind of on I would say the bleeding edge of what's going on. But, not doing the podcast really I feel like if we weren't doing it, we would never be able to keep on top of what's going on. Like even after 3 weeks, I feel like, oh shit, what's happened,
Yeah, it's an interesting world because I feel like for a large portion of my career, I'd spend the mornings reading about what the latest is in technology, and you'd feel like you're kind of waiting for the next thing to take place. Whereas now I feel like I can't keep up with it fast enough. Everything is just moving so quickly, and you have to devote a good portion of your day looking at it. And then there's also another thing, which is that AI doesn't go through like this traditional release cycle. Like it gets better every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's incremental changes being made to prompts and agent graphs and things like that. That's happening on a daily basis. Some of these things are self-improving, meaning they might be making adjustments to their own prompts over time. So it's hard to know when to reevaluate a vendor or a product. And sometimes you come back to something after some time and it's gotten way better, but it hasn't had a release notice of hey, this huge improvement has been made. I think that's been something for a lot of AI developers who have, perhaps looked at some of the development tools in the past and said, hey, this isn't quite there yet. A lot of those tools have really evolved without telling anyone. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think about the, how long ago we both abandoned kind of OpenAI, and then with Atlas coming out and, the need to kind of circle back and, naturally, you're touching the LLM again. And, so yeah, very, very interesting. And there's so much going on. I mean, I read something this morning about lots of investments still happening in AI coding. It seems to be the most interesting, hottest area of AI. Speaking of which, there was a report today on more AI bubble, sort of circular money movement. Anthropic is investing or buying $30 billion worth of Azure compute from Microsoft, directly to use NVIDIA's, GPUs. And separately, when you look at these investments that are being made, or, capital expenditures, whatever you want to call them, I don't know if they're investments or, purely just, Anthropic needs to scale and the demand is there. I mean, $30 billion is nothing to sneeze at. I don't even know where they're getting that money from, if it's cash, if it's, VC money or whatever. But then you start to realize where the money is coming from, because Microsoft is investing $5 billion into NVIDIA for this deal, and NVIDIA is investing $5 billion back into Microsoft. So there's a net there of $5 billion. And then NVIDIA is sending $10 billion back to Anthropic. So you have
Yeah.
$20 billion that's exchanging hands and
Mhm.
30 billion going out the other way. And it's just like the weird, like people are just propping each other up with these billion-dollar investments.
Yeah. I think we're in the stage where like, I've heard I've watched some LinkedIn posts from folks that I know who are asking about like, when is the efficiency going to come? When are we going to start getting models that are more efficient? A good example, like the human brain runs on like 70 watts and somehow we're able to do a lot of this stuff. So when do you get the efficiency?
Mm.
When does the efficiency curve start being taken care of? And the answer is not now, not when this much money is being thrown around.
Mhm.
It's after some of the players have been culled and you go through some of the downturn that you start to get some of those efficiencies because of necessity. I know when DeepSeek came out of China, that was one of the things that came up was
I
like
was thinking the same thing, just as
being
you.
more efficient.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not how the business cycle works here, right? The first stage is that it's going to be about bigger data centers, more electricity, bigger context windows, just cram as much stuff into this as possible, is the stage that we're in right now. And then I think at some point in the future, the efficiency stage will be the necessity when the money is not as fluid. At least that's my opinion. So I think this is just part and parcel with that. Like right now, we're in this and I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly what they're doing behind the scenes. I hear people saying it's circular and that's a downside. I also hear people saying that this is normal and giving a whole bunch of examples of other things in the past that, we never really even talked about, because they weren't top news like AI is. So I'm not sure, honestly, but I believe that there's a lot of money being thrown around right now. And I think that the efficiency aspect of it will come later for those that are commenting about why we aren't becoming more efficient. That's why.
Mm. Yeah, and you could see it in other, like limits are being reached in terms of scale. And,
Mhm.
it's really, governments are stepping in and, things like, for example, like power, like electricity, you mentioned those things as well.
Mhm.
Like, um, so yeah, really interesting. So yeah, let's jump into the tool of the week. And really curious, we talk a lot here about security and um, you know, the underpinnings of this topic are really around, you know, some of the bad things you can do with an LLM having control over your machine. So like as part of
Mhm.
the tool calling, right, that Claude Code does, for example, like a very simple example is like why Claude Code, like one tool call that Claude Code handles better than like say like, maybe a year or two ago where you would shove as much context as you possibly could into, ChatGPT, and then you would be copying and pasting back and forth. And there's just no way to keep context, like so like things like Cursor and Claude and other coding agents, they use context clues, right? So like one tool call that Claude Code uses is the ability to grep a project for mention of something. And you could see these tool calls happening,
Mhm.
if you start digging a little bit under the hood of what's going on. And so and of course, there's a settings file in Claude that allows you to allow listings. So it's not constantly asking you permission to say run an ls command or run a grep command. And for those that are not familiar, like these are commands that help you find things within a file structure in Linux or Windows or whatever have you. Um, so yeah, it makes sense that, like, Claude is, Anthropic is thinking about security features, because even with an allow list, you can do some pretty horrible things to your machine without even realizing it. And developers are using these tools and may not fully understand like the full scope of what they're actually doing when they're agreeing or consenting to Claude to take the next action. And something like an LLM proxy is not going to deal with this type of thing. It's not going to deal with what's happening locally per se. I mean, you could certainly like limit what kind of tool calls are happening, maybe on the output side. But once those tool calls make it back machine, your machine is, Claude is going to have permissions or ask permissions to do those things. So yeah, I'm really interested to hear about this. It was a big preface to the topic, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so there's two things that I guess we'll talk about. There's that Claude has, and really there's three things, because the third is you don't use either of them. And at that level, you still have protections, like you mentioned, like settings files and things like that, that allow you to have allow lists and deny lists. Now, the problem, if you've been using Claude or any sort of coding agent, is that, AI has, or these AI agents have, they're very committed to getting the job done. And you give them a set of tools and you give them a priority around which tools you want them to use. So for instance, you might give it a write tool that's very special, that knows how to write. But eventually you get to, like, it needs a bash tool to be able to do some great things. So it has the ability to do bash. Now, you don't want it to use bash to write. You want it to use the write tool to write. But occasionally it's like, it's like Deion Sanders. It'll fail at using the write tool for some reason. That's probably has to do with some configuration of how they document it. It's very probabilistic. So it'll have great documentation on how to use a rule, but sometimes it'll fail at using the rule and then reattempt at using the rule, using the error message as guidance about how to reuse the rule. That all works great. That's all fine. And you can fine tune that by doing the prompts behind the scenes. That's honestly the reason why Claude Code is probably the king right now in IDEs, is because they've really got their prompts down. Their tool calling is all dialed in, so it makes less mistakes when it calls a tool. They've really done a good job in protections, which we're about to talk about with sandboxing and dev containers, and a whole host of things. They probably have their graph down much better, or doing it in a way that's more efficient, breaking down tasks, giving it to subagents, etc. All that makes up how their tool works well. Now, the problem is that these things will sometimes spin off of a path that you put them on. So for instance, you give it a write tool, you tell it to use the write tool. For some reason, it fails at using the write tool one time. And normally it would retry, but sometimes it occasionally goes, well, I have bash. I could just do, I could pipe a pipe to something else, or echo to a pipe to a file. There's a whole host of ways that it could go and do its job using bash and a shell script or something like that. So it'll occasionally go down that road and do bash. You might tell it, the write tool that Claude Code had handed it might have rules around what it's allowed to do when it writes, but sometimes it'll break out of that mold by using bash and going through the side path. So you find, if you watch it for long enough, you'll notice that it will take side paths through things sometimes that make you, from a security perspective, say, hey, benign in this circumstance, but I'm not going to allow bash auto allow, because it'll occasionally do something where I'm like, don't do it that way, do it the other better way. Or the read tool has rules around it that doesn't let it look at my .env, but sometimes the AI will use bash and then look at your .env. And you're like, whoa, you're not allowed to do that. So that's where sandboxing comes in. Sandboxing is, in Claude Code, you could do /sandbox. And really the whole idea behind sandboxing is to allow you to do more auto allows. Because what's happening is for folks that are starting to get the hang of this, or have had the hang of it for a while, their problem is that they want to, they're like an operator, getting dings on their computer from a variety of agents that are working on a variety of tickets, and they're going in there and checking on them. They want more time between the dings. They don't want to get a ding every single time it wants to use a bash tool, and they look at it and say, okay, fine, you can use it. They want it to just use the bash tools, right? Just go ahead and use everything you want. Just get the job done. Only ding me when it's really, really important. Not, can I use this bash tool again for the fourth time? Now, on the other hand, you don't want to just auto allow bash tools because it's going to spin out and do something potentially dangerous. And then when you talk about security, like what if someone injected some code? What if you're doing a PR on some sort of open source project and someone puts some sort of like vulnerability in there and you run it on your own machine? So sandboxing is also going to help you in that area. So what it is it when you do /sandbox inside of Claude, it wraps your environment in a virtual machine, and it locks down everything like almost like a deny-all environment. So all your network calls are going to be deny-all by default. All your file operations outside of your current working directory or your project are going to be deny-all. And it does this by hosting in a virtual machine, sharing, mounting folders, and having a proxy for the network rules. And so it locks all this stuff down. And so now you can do accept all on your bash scripts, on all your tools, including bash, because you're now sure it's not going to delete something outside of that folder. It's not going to do something naughty that it's not supposed to do. And then over time, as you hit into walls where it tries to go out the network this way, you can allow, okay, that domain is allowed, or okay, that port is allowed, or okay, that folder that's outside of our current working directory is allowed, but none others. You can finely grain the permissions so that you can have your tools run more and more in a sort of approve all by default mode. So that's what sandboxing is all about. I would definitely suggest checking it out.
Is it the default?
It is not the default.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because you'll find out when you do /sandbox the first time is you're going to run into problems right away. It's because you're going to realize just how much of your project was probably dependent on breaking one of these rules. Like, for instance, if it goes out and does a web search, it's going to ask you, can I do the web search? Can I do this domain? You're going to all of a sudden have to think about what permissions you're going to have around what searches it's allowed to do. If you have third-party libraries that are reaching out to do an API key or an API call, those you're going to have to poke holes for. So those are going to break right away. If you're doing Docker related stuff, you're going to have to really set up Docker in a proper way so that you can set it, you can poke holes through the network, etc. So there is some configuration that you're going to have to do out of the box, but once you go through that configuration and you get your project dialed in its specific needs, you are now in a much safer environment where you can allow things to run with auto approve and not worry that it's going to go mess up your machine or mess up your environment in some way that you're going to regret. So that's sandboxing in a nutshell. It just do /sandbox. It locks you down. And then there's some work to poke the holes you need. But what's nice is when you're using sandboxing and you run your application for the first time and it breaks because it tries to do a network call or tries to do this, you'll get an error that'll tell you, try to do this network call, and you have the opportunity to say, accept this in the future. So it kind of helps you poke the holes for you as you go through it the first couple of times. So eventually, just by using it, you're going to get it dialed into where you need it. So it's a more declarative, it's a more like thoughtful way of developing. When you install that new dependency, that you're going to have to poke a hole for it, and you're going to have a git commit that shows the hole being poked. It's a much more thorough way of getting it done. Dev containers, on the other hand, is similar in a sense that it's creating a Docker container for your environment, but it's much more about creating a consistent experience for all your developers. So that, a good example, a lot of people use v-env or virtual env, v-env, or whatever you want to call it, to accomplish similar things locally. But this really helps you across your whole team dial it in. And what's nice also is that eventually your dev container can be your build container too. So you can share the same container across both, which gives you consistency across your dev team and your build operations. So you don't have to worry about silly things like, oh, well, it worked on my machine, but it didn't work in the dev build machine, or it didn't work on developer B, but it worked on developer A, because they all have a different combination of npm installs on their own machine, etc. So it takes care of all that stuff for you, and it's
So
a much
would
more
the CI/CD environment also benefit from the sandboxing, like security features?
Absolutely, yeah. Like, you may want to run your CI/CD pipelines in a sandbox. You may want to run your other types of, like, you might be using Claude Code in its SDK version somewhere in some container or in some environment somewhere. But yeah, definitely, if you are using Claude Code to evaluate anything that's user input, you want to use sandboxing, because that's going to be the main vector for attacking your AI infrastructure or your AI product, is going to be getting user input to the agent.
So would you have a one dev container for your whole organization, or is each dev container like specific to that project?
It's a good question. I mean, I guess the answer to that is probably a little bit personal on how you want to set it up. But I imagine you could probably have a base image that's at the organization level, and then you have every other dev container that has some sort of specific aspect to it. You can have that build upon that base in the Docker container, in the Docker image. So that would be the way I would suggest to do it. But I think most teams would probably just have a different Docker dev container.js in their repository. And then, I should mention that VS Code integrates with this well. So if you're using VS Code, they have, I think it's like remote development, and VS Code immediately, when it sees this .dev container JSON file in your repository. Apologies, I don't remember the exact name of the file. It's like devcontainer.json or something, or maybe there's a dot in the front.
Yeah,
but when that file's in your project, VS Code will automatically recognize it and spawn up that image for you. And then it sets up remote debugging in a way where it's seamless. Now, the first thing I thought was, well, what if my project is Docker? Right? Like, what if my build is producing a Docker image? And there's even setups for how that all works. So, you can get that cleanly working without having to go like Docker and Docker or something silly like that.
So it looks like dev containers is an open standard that was created by Microsoft.
Exactly,
and then Claude is just leveraging that as far as, so it makes sense why VS Code has an extension that natively understands it.
Yep. So that's why you would use either. So dev containers is about making consistency across your whole dev team, quickly onboarding. It's really nice. I think with AI, engineers become a little bit more transient in terms of how they go from repo to repo and are able to make changes rapidly. So the more you can make that onboarding experience quick and easy for engineers to bounce around, the much more effective they're going to be in terms of getting their commits in quickly and moving on to their next task. And then sandboxing, like I said, is really about, on the individual level, getting you to a point where you feel comfortable with more approve all for everything. So, if you're working on one project very synchronously, then okay, maybe you're watching everything that's going on. You're getting comfortable with how the AI is working. But eventually, once you have your process dialed in, and you start to work on more projects at once, like I have 2 to 3 IDEs open at once, and I'm bouncing from one to the other based on which one's done with what I did last. And sometimes they're all 3 of them are spinning at the same time, and I'm waiting for it to come back to me. The longer it can go on its own without having to come back to me, asking me some permission to do something that I'm going to approve, but I don't feel like auto approving it on my machine because it's not sandboxed, the better. So once you sandbox it, you can start auto approving more. And maybe if your capacity is 2 projects at once, you can go to 3 or 4 projects at once, or 4 tickets at once, because you'll have more time between it coming back to ask you a question.
Yeah. That makes sense, especially if you're running like at the same time, or you're using like something like, I know there's a similar concept of like background agents. So like orchestrating like lots of things happening in the background, like maybe you have like some kind of semi-autonomous infrastructure and you yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What was most interesting about that was, you know, because where I went with it is like, okay, how do you then as an enterprise or an organization enforce like safe like coding practices? Like how do you enforce somebody when they use a project that they use the dev container? Like, is there a way within the Claude construct that you can't break out of that and then do something bad like on your system?
It's a good question. I don't know if I know the answer to that. I'll have to do some research into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an interesting thought. And by the way, one little differentiator, there are a lot of like this sandboxing stuff that's already been done. People might say, well, what are you talking about that's really new? A lot of it has been like running your code on some remote OpenAI server or some remote like Cursor server or something like that. This
Mhm.
sandboxing in Cloud Code is all on your own machine.
Mhm.
This is a virtual environment on your own machine. So you're not like putting your code out there on on some virtual machine running in some other environment, just to be clear there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, developers want to use their own systems. They don't want to be coding in a web browser. It's not, you know, I'm sure it can be done for some stuff, but I don't think we're quite at the point yet of like IDE-less programming, like or like laptop-less programming. Like I think there are some things, like for example, like you know, the website for the company that we work for, like we make changes in GitHub and we're orchestrating Claude in a pipeline. But
Yeah.
occasionally you need to drop down into the IDE. It's not perfect. And I don't think the goal is for it to be perfect. It's just that you can quickly, I mean, I can open my cell phone and I can have an idea and I can mock that up like without
Yeah.
ever opening up a laptop and I can review it, you know, I get an alert on Slack and I can review it in a, or I get an email alert and I can review it in my on my phone, you know, in a staging environment. Um, so yeah, it makes sense that you would want to have this feature. Yeah, if you're running like if you're copying and pasting code still in a web browser, you know, there's limitations to that.
Yeah, the sad part is when I talk to companies out there, there's still a lot of copying and pasting going
Mhm.
on in the AI world, and part of that is that there's a lot of organizations that kind of they haven't put out an opinion yet about AI internally, so they are kind of saying we don't use AI internally, but folks are using their own personal accounts or maybe on a team by team basis they might have a
You're
team
using it
account.
internally.
Yeah, they're using it internally. I mean,
This is shadow AI at its finest
it's it's funny. It really is funny because
and scary.
now I use AI to write my responses in emails to like to customer. Like if I have to itemize a whole bunch of things, like and I have to send an update on something customer service related or something to a product I bought, I'll have AI write it and send it to them because it's much more concise than my babbling. And it's quicker and faster. And I'm sure the person on the other end appreciates a nice response. And then they'll respond back to me with AI too. And I like it. So it's like, there's a lot of that going on. I'm sure everyone's using it to make what they write more concise and more worded properly and spelt right and et cetera. Um, but I don't think every organization has their head around how to secure it yet, how to acknowledge that it's being used. So they're kind of in this middle ground where it's being used insecurely. But the organization is kind of saying, well, we didn't say they could, but they're also not like going around and beating everyone over the head if they used it. So hopefully we're moving into the next stage where like there's a lot of tools out there that are available. There's a lot of expertise on how to secure this stuff. A lot of the stuff we've talked about on the podcast here over the last 14 episodes have been in that arena. There's a lot of things you can do to secure this. So if you're in an organization right now and you aren't securing this, it's another attack vector. It's just like your network security. You're going to have to acknowledge that it exists, and that it's an awesome productivity tool, by the way, when you figure out how to not have your organization copying and pasting anymore and drawing upon internal tools that are have your company details inside of it easily accessible, have guardrails around it, making sure that things aren't leaked. So I think we're transitioning into that period now. A lot of organizations are starting to talk about like, how do we secure this? How do we get this internally? They're starting to think about like how their data might be leaking. So yeah, I see the market transitioning, but you still see a lot of people copying and pasting too.
Yes, that's something that we'll cover in a new release that Google came out with. But I wanted to transition into the Killam chain because it really brings up an interesting attack vector, specifically around some of the things you can do with doing a takeover. Meaning, if for whatever reason you have access to these tools, there's some terrible things that you can do. And there was an article a few days ago. It was actually late last week. There was some buzz about it before, but Anthropic finally came out and said that they had a report in mid-September that somebody was using Claude code to actually execute a cyber attack. So it was a Chinese state sponsored group, and they manipulated Claude code tool into attempting to infiltrate into roughly 30 global targets and succeeding in a small number of cases. The operation targeted large tech companies, financial institutions, chemical manufacturing companies, and government agencies. We believe this is the first documented case of a large-scale cyber attack executed without substantial human intervention. And then they talk about how they mapped it out and mitigated it. These attacks are likely to only grow in their effectiveness to keep pace this rapidly advancing through. So yeah, I mean, you could imagine that, like, if somebody downloads code onto their machine, a project, an open source project, and there are context clues or ways to even an insider to execute a large scale attack using these tools from the inside, you now have like a team of hackers that is available at your disposal with all these amazing tool calls and, so yeah, I think it just further emphasizes the need for such in-depth defense like sandboxing and dev containers and a proxy and, good policy around your internal use of AI.
Yeah. I mean, this is, obviously something that's possible, in my opinion. Like when I saw the article, usually when Anthropic comes out with something, I usually try to suspend disbelief a little bit because they tend to be, they're a shop that's trying to build their personality around AI security. So a lot of their press releases are about, look at this crazy thing we saw that's dangerous, right? And some of them are a little bit contrived. At least in my opinion, I thought in the past, where it like blackmailed somebody, or, the prompt said you could blackmail somebody as an option. So it chose that option, right? But this one is definitely a real thing. Like I know 100% based on my own usage of AI that I could build something like that. So it's surprising to me that it took this long. I'm sure there's probably a lot of other successful ones that have taken place.
They're probably low scale, type efforts, like more like kitty scripting type
code
generation. Yeah. Not actually using AI to orchestrate a massive attack. Like Maybe
But
it's
it's
you setting up your own
definitely,
farm, doing it, not using a third party to do it.
yeah, it's definitely capable of doing this right now. Now, what was another thing that was interesting about the article was there was human intervention. So they had like a human in the loop aspect
Yeah,
to
it
it.
said little human intervention.
Yeah, little human intervention, but there was a few cases that they said a human jumped in. So this just goes to show you that like this stuff is very powerful because
Mhm.
not only is this like automation you can run where it's got a set of tools, it's got reasoning, and it's got a graph loop that it's going through. It's got a whole org chart of other agents it can talk to that have its own set of tools and reasoning. And it's going through all of this stuff, reasoning about what tool to use next, what it found. Oh, I
Mm.
saw this. Maybe there's a vulnerability. I'll go ask this sub agent to build this tool. And then it's doing this all automated, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's incredibly powerful. And this might have not even been, this could have been a crude version of it, but it could get so much more sophisticated than that, and it will over time. And not only that, but it can start to improve itself based on the types of graphs you can build behind the scenes. It could start to get better over time based on past results it's had. All this stuff is very interesting. And then even when it fails, it can drop a human in to pick up where it left off, and finish the job or give it another suggestion. Hey, why don't you try this? So it just like it increases the productivity of software developers, it increases the productivity of hackers. It turns a single hacker into a director of a legion of hackers. Um, and just like it takes an engineer and turns them into a director of a legion of engineers. So I think that as more and more people start to learn how this works, and then also once the tooling is dialed in, so it becomes easier and easier for the script kiddies to take what folks like us have built and manipulate it into something of their use. These things will become more and more sophisticated over time, and it's not a surprise. In fact, it's a perfect example of what you could do with these tools, both for good and bad. And so the pen testing industry is going to be interesting because pen testing is going to get so much better.
Mhm.
You're going to be able to have like an army of people attack your network and find all the holes. So I think it's going to be a boon for security. There's going to be a lot better security tools for finding all these holes.
Yeah.
Um,
I thought about the dev containers thing. Like
mhm.
while you are making advancements to make it easier for people to doing things for good, for example, like what if your tool call is like Metasploit? Like you don't need to like ask it for permission to execute an exploit. Like have it build out the framework for identifying, okay, I fingerprinted this, IoT device and the firmware is out of date. I can tell by the banner, and now I'm going to execute an exploit. Oh, the exploit didn't work. Let me go look for a different exploit.
Mhm.
And it has the full permission to execute all that stuff. And then the second thing that I thought of was like, you have platforms like Base 44 and Replit, like that are designed for people to do no code. Like, it's very easy today for somebody that has an idea for a mobile app to go and build a mobile app without ever knowing how to code, knowing much about how to get an Apple developer license, or, it's all very, very simple. You just pay them like a fee and you get access to build your app from soup to nuts. And those things are only going to get better. But then I thought about like, like you can go on the dark web, like, you know, using Tor, and onion routers, and you have access to all these like, hackers for hire and kind of really illegal type things that you can do. I mean, we've seen like things around like how ransomware organizations are run like, corporations, like we've seen the Telegram chats
Yeah.
and how they have divisions and departments and how they pay them. Like there's a payroll system, and it's very, very, very well orchestrated. And you can see that I guarantee that these things exist today where you can basically go and put in a URL for a website and it'll go and do a targeted attack. It'll build targeted exploits for it in probably, fractions of a day, if you will. Whereas in the past, like, you would pay somebody to do a targeted attack and, you'd pay them in cryptocurrency and it would be concealed. And so, yeah, like the rise in uh, paid bounties for attacks are just only going to, that business, if you will, like that dark business will only get better or grow, if you will, say better.
I remember that back when I was working a little bit more in the field of looking at breaches and stuff like that. I remember that, and this was a while ago. So this was before AI had really blown up. But ransomware, it's so big, they have like affiliate programs where like there's a main ransomware, and then there's all the people who are like, yeah, if you get it on a computer, you get a percentage of the money. It's like a whole affiliate. Like the distribution is a network of people, just trying to make a dime off of like an affiliate relationship. So it's very sophisticated. It's huge in, the countries around the world that perhaps don't have as much protections around those things, similar to how you see like human trafficking when it comes to like these call centers where they're trying to get you to get gift cards and stuff like that. There's a huge industry behind this. In some cases, just whole buildings and workforces and stuff like that. So it's AI is going to make it better and worse. The tools to find these holes are going to be better, and then also the folks that are on the other side who are going to be able to do much more with less. Now you aren't going to need a call center full of people in some random country trying to scam seniors out of money around the world. You'll just have a computer that's acting like a building full of scammers, and it's just going to be an agent out there doing stuff. Now, to be fair to Claude, there was a lot of effort that these folks had to go through to get this done, because Claude itself will try to stop you from doing it by simply saying, I'm not going to build that for you. But the problem is that a lot of these things are dual use. So like, you could say, oh, Metasploit, why does it exist at all? Well, it's an important tool for attacking your own network and trying to figure out why or where someone might get in. So, it's a double-edged sword. If you're building security tools, you're basically building hacker tools.
Yep. I mean, it's just like the way of the world. Like the more that you innovate, like things are good. Like even with quantum, like, we've had to think ahead, and yeah, it's an arms race for sure. Like to pivot into the news or noise. So before I get into the topic itself, we were talking a little bit about no code type coding solutions like Replit or Base 44. If you're not familiar with those things and you're not a developer, you should check those things out, because you can really, as an entrepreneur or somebody that has an idea, you can really test your theories out a lot faster. You want to build a game. The ability to build stuff today and not know stuff about software engineering, especially if you're young and you have aspirations or you have an idea, definitely these are very inexpensive ways to test out your ideas. So on that front, we're going to talk about a new product coming out of Google called Google AI Code Studio. But today, Google announced Gemini 3 that just came out. And I haven't read the article. I literally just saw it. It was released 12 minutes ago or 2 hours ago, whatever it was. They're saying the benchmarks are better than GPT 5.1, which was just released. And the reason I mention all of this is that it's one of the models that's available in Google AI Studio. So yeah, I know I just kind of put this on your desk today, but it seems to be very similar. It's a very different approach than what the reason I highlighted it is, sure, there's a shit ton of these out there. You have Codex from OpenAI, you have Claude Code, you have Cursor, you have Amazon Kiro, but this seems to be a different angle that Google is taking, which is they are also taking the no code approach, which is very different than what the other ones are doing. I think it's kind of interesting that they are doing this because they're really, the other people are not really playing in this space, and they actually have like a gallery of ideas. So like, and they really kind of took the Instagram model of remixing. So, you know, like on Instagram or other video type platforms like YouTube, you can take somebody else's video if they allow you to, and then you can remix it. You can add new stuff to it. You can chop it up.
So it's like an open source fork remix type
Essentially,
thing.
yeah. So you could take like a landing page and build a website. They have games. Like they have like a Minecraft game like with blocks. They have like a game like Sim City, like Sim Earth, you know, the 3D like builder. They have like a first person shooter, like, you know, pretty cool stuff. And then you could take that stuff and build on top of it. And also interesting too is they've adopted MCP, which is really interesting as well. So
I think that like in the long tail, like I think that's the future because like the no code, right? I think ultimately everything is automated to the point where it's like no code. But I think that there's some amount of time that nobody knows how long, it could be 10 years or longer, that it takes to get to the point where, you know, you can do sophisticated things with no code. Because you can get to an awesome demo with no code, but the problem is are you ever going to be able to secure an enterprise application or scale it with no code? Probably not. But the folks that are doing no code IDEs aren't advertising it that way. They're not saying you're going to build a production app that's secure. They're basically saying, hey, you can get a quick project off the ground. You could build something, a game, you know. So I think it meets the expectations of the user. The user wants to, you know, do something fun and cool and create a game. They're not looking for, you know, something enterprise out of the gate. And then assuming they got some sort of traction around it, they got, you know, VCs were like, this is a great idea. They could then, you know, scale it into an organization that had all that. So I think one day in the future, the AI is just so smart that when you're the no code developer, it's securing all the stuff behind the scenes, hypothetically. But I feel like there's a big gap between where we are today and that.
well, I think it's similar to like the automobile, right? Like when automobiles were first invented, they, you know, had a steering wheel, like no AC, no radio, whatever. And the steering wheel was really the mechanism for the human to tell the vehicle where to go. And now you're at a point where you don't need a driver. You don't need a steering wheel.
Yeah.
You don't need now we still have steering wheels because you can do a takeover, right? It's essentially, are we at the point? I think it's an individual thing. Like it's not critical mass yet, but like the steering wheel exists, like code exists, right? It allows you to do the takeover. So what we're really talking about is getting rid of the steering wheel. Like I don't care about the code. I don't care about security because that functionality is built into the computer of the vehicle, right? The
I think
vehicle
the
has
stage
better
we're in,
security. The vehicle does a better job at security than the human beings will. And so like when it gets to the point where the AI is doing a better job of the security than the humans will, then you can, like we've talked before, like then it can just write machine code. It could be more efficient. It will write better code structures. It'll be more secure. It'll be immune to things that humans make mistakes on. Like humans like inherently create problems using like bad regexes. And like the computer will just start doing things like at a machine code level that a regex like function is created for a human being to create efficiency or to instruct the computer to do something, but there's probably a more efficient way for the computer to do it that's more complex, but a human being could never write that function, right? And you could actually do it at a machine code level that's immune to certain vulnerabilities.
Yeah. I think that I like your analogy with the car. I think where we are in AI coding is from the spectrum of like you write it by hand, line by line for the last 20, 30 years, or or no code, right? Where you don't do anything. I think where we are right now in the car analogy is the engineer is sitting in the passenger seat.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the hand on the button to say,
No, like this, like,
I'm taking over.
Oh shit, oh shit. There's a puddle.
Or like the Tesla robotaxi, like sitting in the passenger seat, like, yeah, I'm a driver, but I'm not driving, but I'm going to take over if something goes wrong. It's like, I'm an engineer, I'm kind of driving, but I'm mostly just
Waymo
observing.
have no steering wheel?
Yeah, I'm saying Waymo has no steering wheel. I mean, it's an interesting debate. Like the debate between Waymo and Tesla is probably an episode on its own. Or at least a segment on its
And by the way, Amazon launched theirs today, I think, Zoom or something like that. Yeah.
Is that for like delivering packages, or was it like a taxi?
It's a robo-taxi service.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's not Tesla's robo-taxi, but it's in that, robo-taxi is meant to describe this industry. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, on the note of like how this stuff improves behind the scenes, like I feel like the general public is probably not aware of like how the Teslas have improved behind the scenes. Like they've gone from like, I think a year or two ago where you wouldn't go, first of all, you couldn't even use self-driving on regular roads like some amount of years ago. You had to only use it on highways. And it was fairly good at highways, but you'd still watch the hell out of it. Then when it started doing regular roads, it was like you'd go 10 minutes before you'd have to take over, not even, because it would be always making some sort of mistake. Maybe not an unsafe mistake, never an unsafe mistake, but it would make a mistake that would be like, oh, I'm taking over. This is just annoying me and probably annoying the person behind me. But now, and it's gone through, a spectrum where it's gotten better and better and better. Now, I think it's been like 6 months to a year before I've had to take over. Like, occasionally I'll take over when it's a speed bump and I'll go over the speed bump and not see whether it's going to do it. But now even those I don't even watch anymore. So I can, I'm supposed to watch it, but I feel like it's to the point right now where I could probably fall asleep and it would get me there 99.9% of the time. So I know they're on the verge of, and by the way, when you look at their stats, like their stats are, I mean, awesome. If you take them at face value, they're saying that they're like 3 billion miles recorded of autopilot, and they've only had 2 deaths. According to the national average,
wow,
with 2 billion miles, they should have had 82 deaths. Humans would have 82 deaths in that. So if their numbers are correct, there's, close to 80 people who are alive that wouldn't be alive.
Yeah, I'm interested. Where I'm interested in is how it like when you can get to a place of like everybody using the same technology, like how much more efficient does like travel become? Mm-hmm. The impact on like, like in the US specifically, like if you've ever been to like a foreign country and seen like especially Europe or mm-hmm. Japan and see the way that they use like rail transit, like how sophisticated it is. And how the U.S. prioritized in the 50s, like with Eisenhower, the highway system for, for travel and not necessarily made investments. And you're seeing lots of capital investments here in the Northeast corridor where I live in northern New Jersey. They're rebuilding bridges that are hundreds of years old, 100 years old, mm-hmm. tunnels through, under the Hudson River, like. That's
awesome.
Like crazy stuff, but billions of dollars to rehabilitate for a very narrow section of the United States. Granted, mm-hmm. it's a very well populated part, but like you're talking about from Boston to DC, that's like a very, very small portion of the US. The only way to really travel fast across the country is via air travel. So I'm really, those types of things, whether it be freight or, travel, like how do you make traffic is a huge problem in the United States, like just
Yeah.
congestion, and like a lot of it is humans just, it's probably worse now with people looking at their phones, like, looking up, looking down. I'm guilty of it, Um, so
Yeah.
yeah.
I truly believe that this technology, and by the way, I've gone through stages. Like when I first heard about self-driving cars, I was like, I like driving too much. I
Mhm.
want my freedom. Right? I want to drive. Don't tell me I can't drive. But then when I got the option, I was like, okay, I'll try this out. And then
Mhm.
it got better and better and better. And now I'm to the point where it's like sometimes I want to drive. Sometimes I'm like, I don't feel like driving right now.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't feel
Yeah.
like driving right now. Happens a lot more and more the better it gets. Right. And then, I can't remember who said it on a podcast, but someone had mentioned they're like, are you going to put a steering wheel on the robo taxi? And because they want to drive, or on the cyber cab. And Elon was like, no, we're not putting a steering wheel on the cyber cab. And he goes, trust me, you don't want to drive, even though you think you want to drive. And the other person was like, no, I want to drive. And Elon was like, okay, when was the last time you've been in an Uber? And you thought to yourself, wow, I really wish I was driving right now. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, that's true. That's 100% true. You actually would prefer to be on your phone and doing whatever you want to do, watching a movie, or you know,
Yeah. Answering
uh,
emails. Yeah.
it's a good. And imagine you could get in your car, go to sleep, and wake up at the destination. You could just take a trip to Florida and just fall asleep in your car and wake up in
Yeah.
Florida the next day.
Yeah.
I mean, for the digital nomads and the people, working that, doing the whole vehicle living and stuff, it's going to be a pretty awesome experience for those folks.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so there's a lot of cool things that I think are coming out. Also, one thing I heard, I know Grok 4.1 just came out, which is pretty cool. And it's got some new emotional aspects to it, where it better talks about certain topics. It gave some examples of that, which were interesting. And then there was, like, in true Elon fashion, he's hyping up the next version, Grok 5. And he mentioned that Grok 5 is going to, beyond being, like, exponentially better than Grok 4, it was going to process real-time video in real time. Now, for those that might be somewhat familiar to where the market is right now, you might say, hey, I already have video on ChatGPT, or video when I'm talking to Grok or something like that. But that's video that's like kind of, it's a little, I don't know exactly how it's working behind the scenes, to be honest, but I think it's more like you still have to ask the AI agent, hey, what do you think is going on right now? And then it's like looking at a screenshot of what your video is right now and answering
Mm.
something about it. It's not watching in real time, frame by frame. So it misses, like if you have a video and you say, what kind of car is that? And it's driving by, like, it's going to say, oh, that's this type of car based on a picture of the car. Whereas, like, real-time video is, it would see it drive by and say, oh, that's, this type of car, and it's driving this fast, and, etc. That to me is very intriguing, because that's like the AI is always watching, always listening, is a little bit different than the lack of end-to-endness that we've had up until this point. I feel like AI isn't very end to end. You have to prompt it and tell it to start doing something, and then it's going to get that done and end. And then usually, like you said, you have to drop in the IDE and do a little bit more. But I'm waiting for AI to be this, like, always listening, always watching, always taking action type
Mm.
of thing. And I think that made me think that
Interesting.
maybe that's coming a little bit, but we'll have to see
Yeah.
how it materializes, or if at all.
Yeah. So before we close, I think that was a good way to transition to one more topic I want to chat about, which is Chinese handset company Tencent. Not a
Mm,
huge fan of China, but they have a really novel idea about ads, and it makes a lot of sense. Like,
mm,
they have come up with a technology. So the way that it was presented was, imagine watching a TV show or a movie and there are no commercials.
Mm-hmm.
And as you are watching it, based off of the device that you're watching it on, ads are presented to you without you even realizing. Like, for example, like,
Like AI generated video.
well, the video is the same for you, but when the movie is recorded or the movie is created, they use kind of like, I don't say it's green screen technology, but imagine you're like at a bus depot and there's like a bus ad, or somebody picks up a drink of a soda, and
Like
as
if I'm
you
a
are
mechanic, it's going to be like motor oil instead. Oh, I need to buy that.
yeah, so like objects, like various objects as
That's
the
pretty
movie
cool.
is filmed or the TV show is filmed are blank. And
Yeah.
then those are filled in real time based off of
Mhm.
their targeted ads, based off of who you are as a person and your preferences.
Yeah.
My mind just went somewhere with this, that, oh, this is how all ads are going to be. Like
Yeah, and
right
we
now,
we got we
ads
got into this. We got into this on a previous podcast a little
did
bit.
we?
Yeah, we did because I'll tell you why. I'm all for this when it comes to entertainment. I think it's brilliant because you don't have to go to an ad. It probably doesn't ruin the entertainment for you, and it's entertainment. It's all fun anyway. Where I don't like it is when they start doing that to like your research, right? Like when you start saying, "Hey, can you tell me what happened in 19 whatever?" and it comes back with the history, and then an ad is somehow slickly embedded in there. Or when you say, "Hey, can you do some research into the best weed whackers?" and it comes back with like the Google approved list of AdWords that in other words, when the AdWords when the advertisement starts slipping into your queries in a way that like degrades the accuracy of them or degrades the usefulness of the data, that's where I don't like. That's where I feel like
No,
also
this
can
was
get dangerous.
specifically around
Mhm.
about films and movies and
I like
shows. And
that.
here's
I
how
love
it
that.
works.
I love that
AI
idea.
detects everyday objects in a scene. Oh, it's not even pre-recorded. Oh, okay. Here's how it works. AI detects everyday objects in a scene, a billboard, a cup, a car, and dynamically replaces them with brand logos based on your location, interest, and browsing behavior.
Yeah.
If you're in India, the actor's coffee might show Blue Tokai. In US, it becomes Starbucks. Same movie, same moment, totally
Mhm.
different brand, personalized just for you. This isn't just product placements, it's hyper personalized, real-time advertisement powered by AI already being tested by millions of users. If it scales, it could eliminate disruptive breaks forever, giving entertainment companies a new revenue stream and viewers a seamless experience. No interruptions, no skips, just stories with ads blended so perfectly you might not even notice them.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I love it for movies. I love it for entertainment. But when it's
Yeah,
like
no, you don't
something
want
that's
tainted. You want
when it's
biased results.
like if I'm watching the news though, I don't want like India's Prime Minister Modi picking up a Starbucks cup before he does his speech, and then I'm getting like this jaded idea of like what's going on in the world. You know what I mean? But in entertainment, I don't mind it, right? I
You
think that's
might get
brilliant.
that. I mean, at the
That's
end of
of
the
course we're
day,
gonna get that. You're
news
gonna get
companies,
everything.
news at the end of the day, a news company is still funded by the same ad revenue that, your favorite TV show is.
News
There's no
companies
real
are
difference.
entertainment at this point. They're entertainment companies.
Sure. Yeah.
Infotainment.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
that's the part that I'm cynical about. But the movie thing, I think it's a brilliant idea. I think it's a great idea. Um, because you're suspending disbelief when you're watching a movie. It's all manufactured. It's supposed to be entertaining and slipping in a, you know, uh, who doesn't like, I remember when I was, like you can do it very well. Like I remember when I was younger, we watched when that movie Wayne's World came out.
Mm.
He
Oh
goes,
yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he saw the Pepsi, and I was like, I thought that was hilarious. That was brilliant, right? That was a brilliant usage of product placement and advertising. I don't mind that at all, but I don't want, a news story to pull out a Pepsi that didn't happen,
Hey, just because you don't want it to happen, Dustin, doesn't mean it won't.
It will.
Yeah.
It will.
I mean, there's all kinds of stuff happening in news today that is ad driven and you don't even realize it. Certain books or movies or, authors are put out in front and, there's messaging and yeah. And again, this would be a global thing, not just a US thing.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back next week and I'm sure we'll have great topics to talk about. Definitely think we should dive into the topic of the future of automotive as it relates to AI, because I think that's a really interesting topic. I know you have a lot of passions around it. See y'all next week.
Take care.